So Joshua Buatsi defeats Dan Azeez on a 12-round unanimous decision to become the mandatory challenger for Dimitri Bivol's WBA light heavyweight title. Now, this fight with Dan Azeez played out pretty much the way I expected. I was always very confident that Joshua Buatsi was going to win. I thought he might even get a late stoppage, and he did actually drop Dan Azeez a couple times in one of the late rounds, although those knockdowns, in my view, were more the result of a slippy canvas rather than any concussive effect from Joshua Buatsi's punches. I think it was very unfortunate for Dan Azeez to receive those 2 counts because, again, that canvas was clearly very slippy for both of them. Anyway, the fight started out quite cagey. Both guys were working their jabs. You could see there was a lot of mutual respect. You could see there was a lot of familiarity there. Azeez was having some very good rounds early on, and even in some of the mid rounds with his jab, that was his best punch. But when it came to everything else, the left hooks and the right uppercut in particular, it was Joshua Buatsi who was getting the better of it. It became apparent, and I expected this, but it became apparent to everyone within a few rounds that Joshua Buatsi was the stronger of the two, hit harder, had the faster hand speed. Dan Azeez was staying in there through discipline, toughness, fitness, a good jab. He was moving his head, trying to make himself as elusive as possible, and he did make Joshua Buatsi miss very wildly on occasions. And Buatsi's known for being a little bit wild at times, a little bit reckless, running red lights from time to time, and he did so in this fight because I don't think he really respected Dan Azeez's power that much. He thought that he could take anything that Dan Azeez could dish out, and so it proved to be the case. I never saw Joshua Buatsi look remotely staggered or troubled by anything that Dan Azeez hit him with, but Dan Azeez did look a little troubled by some of the shots that Joshua Buatsi hit him with, particularly later on in the fight. You know, there were those kind of unfortunate quote-unquote knockdowns that Dan Azeez suffered, but after he got up off the canvas, there was some other attacks from Joshua Buatsi which appeared to genuinely stun and genuinely hurt Dan Azeez. Credit to him for being able to get through those moments when Joshua Buatsi was, again, running red lights and coming straight at him with everything. But yeah, Buatsi proved himself to be the bigger, stronger, faster, more athletic, more gifted fighter, and he took a well-deserved unanimous decision over 12 rounds. Now, overall, I wasn't particularly impressed with Joshua Buatsi. If we're talking about him being a world title challenger, he didn't look like championship material to me. Now, obviously, the bar in the light heavyweight division is particularly high because we've got a couple of world champions in Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol who are very, very, very good indeed. These are not your run-of-the-mill world champions. These are world champions who come along once every generation or once every few generations. Okay, so if it had been a weaker light heavyweight division where the belts are fragmented, then yeah, you could look at Buatsi and say he'll be a world champion. But as it currently stands, the belts would need to get fragmented and they'd need to be in the hands of, less than stellar light heavyweights for me to be confident that Joshua Buatsi could pick up a belt for himself. As it stands right now, I do not see him having much of a chance against Bivol or Beterbiev. If they're unifying in June, it's going to be at least, 3-4 months after that before the winner is ready to make their mandatory defense. So you're talking about, back end of the year. That's a long time for Joshua Buatsi to be out of the ring. In the meantime, surely he'd want to stay active. But the question is, would he want to stay active in a fight as dangerous as the Anthony Yarde fight? I say as dangerous because, again, Joshua Buatsi doesn't look amazing, does he? So him against Anthony Yarde, what is that, a 50-50? In fact, many people would actually be favoring Anthony Yarde. He certainly fought, although not won, at a higher level as a professional. Obviously, Buatsi fought at a much higher level in the amateurs. He had a much more extensive amateur career than Anthony Yarde. We all know that. But in the pro game, Anthony Yarde is the one who's been mixing it with much better opposition. In between fighting poor opposition, he's been jumping up to fight these elite opponents like Kovalev and Artur Beterbiev. And he obviously did have a victory and suffered a defeat to Lyndon Arthur. So would Joshua Buatsi want to take that kind of risk while he waits for his title shot? Or might as well he take the risk? Because if he feels like he's going to lose to the winner of Bivol versus Beterbiev and probably not make that much money out of it, even though he will get the guaranteed cut the mandatory challengers get, maybe it's worth making a load more money against Anthony Yarde first. Perhaps the Anthony Yarde route is trying to go the long way around the houses, whereby if you fight Yarde, win or lose, you think the belts are going to get fragmented after the undisputed fight between Beterbiev and Bivol. You get the chance, even if you've lost to Yarde, to potentially pick up a vacant belt, or rematch Yard for one of the vacant belts. Who knows? But the fight with Aziz turned out the way I expected. And I said in the pre-fight video I did that I did not buy into this beef that Buatsi and Aziz were trying to sell the public in the run-up to the second, the reschedulement of the fight. I didn't buy it at all. They came across to me as good friends, very pally, and you saw that immediately after the final bell. I mean, Joshua Buatsi and Dan Aziz hugged. Buatsi actually kissed Aziz on the forehead. I mean, these guys are literally friends. That was the most contrived beef that I've seen for a long time in the British boxing ring. So it is what it is. The fight itself was decent. I think the Sky commentators, because they've been so deprived of good fights on Sky for such a long time, they were trying to make out as though it was the Thriller in Manila or something. It was a decent fight. It was nothing special. It wasn't that memorable. It was okay. Not a terrible fight, but definitely nothing to write home about. So yeah, I'll leave it there.